project settings where necessary. In this lesson, we're going to take a look around Eclipse and get to know the IDE so that we're all ready to start editing code in Lesson 5. We're going to briefly look at editing and saving files, windows, and perspective customization. Although you might be tempted to skip this lesson, I recommend that at the very least you read through the checklist and try some of the things out on your own computer. Learning these little things will make using Eclipse much easier for you further down the line. Okay, so I've got Eclipse open here with the Maze Run project. You can see I've got a couple of source files open in the editor, maze.cpp and coord.cpp. So first of all, let's just type something in this maze.cpp file, ASDF. Okay. You can see now that an asterisk has appeared next to the file name. That basically means that the file has been edited and not saved. If we build at this point by clicking the hammer, you can see Eclipse tells us there is nothing to be done, even though it has flagged what we've typed as an error, which you can see with the red underlining and the little bug at the side. Eclipse has an error parser running all the time, which examines what you type as you type it, but this is separate from the actual build. And in this case, the parser has flagged the error, but the build system thinks that it's still up to date, or it is still up to date, because the file has not been saved, so the modification time hasn't changed. We can do the same here in this file with a comment and add a new line. And again, when we build it, it says nothing to be done. Now we have two files with an asterisk at the top because they have both been changed and not saved. It's actually not that difficult to edit and rebuild and not realise that you haven't saved your work and then be confused about why your changes haven't done anything. So you can save the files with the File Save menu options, or you can use the much quicker keyboard shortcut, which is Ctrl+S. This is the same for pretty much every other program that you might use. If you want to save multiple files at once, you use Ctrl+Shift+S, and you can see now the asterisk at the top of both files is gone. Now when I build, I get an error because ASDF, of course, is not a valid instruction. The errors appear here in the console window, and if you double click on one, it will take you to the location of the error in the relevant source file. Let's remove the error and rebuild, this time using Ctrl+B, the build shortcut. This time it builds correctly. Remember that Ctrl+B builds all open projects, so if you don't want to be building everything in your workspace, you can close unrelated projects like I've done here. You can see the Hello project is closed, so that won't be built. Right, let's look at what's known as windows. Each of these visual areas you can see, console, problems, properties, is known as a window. You can drag and drop these windows around to better suit how you work. So for example, I could shift this properties window up to the right here, and I could put the console window up there too if I liked. If I didn't like it, I could just move them back down again. Each window is optional, so if you don't like something or don't use something, you can just close it. If you close something that you didn't mean to and want it back, just go to Window, Show View, and select the one you need. So here I'm looking for properties, which I just closed. If you can't see it in this list, select Other down at the bottom and you'll find all of the windows grouped by category. Now, if you've been moving stuff around and closing windows and you really get yourself into a mess and can't seem to recover what you need, you can always use the Window Reset Perspective option. Eclipse asks if you really want to reset the C++ perspective, so we'll say yes please, and everything will revert back to the default. Okay, let's take a look at our project. This is the Project Explorer window on the left, and under each project folder are all the files that your project uses. You can see our source code here under the source folder. We've also got a debug folder which holds the build configuration make files. You can see them in here, And if you click on them, you can see the message about not editing them at the top as they are auto-generated. We don't really need to worry about these, but it's useful to know where they are. Next, we've got the includes folder, which is a representation of the default include paths we have on our system. These will be the standard C and C++ library headers, and you can see if I expand this one and scroll down, there's the IOStream header, which we often include in C++ code. Last of all, we've got our binary at the top here, which is the executable that the project builds. Right, let's just move this area up a bit so you can see what I'm doing, and then tidy away these make files because we don't need them open. We're going to look at each of the default windows in the C++ perspective briefly so you know what each one is for. First of all, problems. If we add our ASDF rubbish back into the maze.cpp file, you can see the error parser has detected it straight away and it's popped up in this problems window below. If we save and build, that turns into 4 errors here. The first error in this case is causing the others. In fact, whenever you're dealing with errors, it's a good idea to work from the first one down because errors seem to cascade into multiple problems. And if you're looking at, for example, the third one in this list, which says recipe for target source maze.o failed, it's not going to be very clear what that's trying to tell you. So start at the top and work down. If you double click on the error in the problems window, it will take you to the location of that error in the source file. Let's get rid of that. You can see the error parser has removed 2 of the errors already, and rebuild, so we're back to 0 problems. Next along from problems is the tasks window, which is one of my favorites. You can see here actually that I've got a list of things I need to do in this project before we get to the next lesson. So the way this window works is that it picks up comments in your code that start with to do and adds them to the tasks list. We can add a new one now by just adding a comment in here that says // to do. This is a new to do. And then you can see that it's appeared down here in the tasks list. It's so handy for little reminders of things you need to go back and refactor or clean up. Just like the problems window, if you double click on a to do, it will take you to that location in the code so that you can get to work on what you need to do. Okay, so I'm going to delete my new to do now. Next along we have the console window, which has the build output, and if you're running a console application, the output from the program too. Sometimes if you have errors in the problems window that aren't making much sense, you will do better to scroll back through the build output and find the first error as reported by GCC, the compiler. Eclipse is good, but sometimes it stops making sense and you just really need to see the build output to understand what's going on. This is where you'll find it. Lastly, down the bottom here, we've got properties, which will display information about a file if you click on it in the Project Explorer. You can see the last modified date, name, path, file size here, among other things. I don't ever really use this. I'd be more likely to go into a terminal and examine files. So I'm going to close this window. Let's take a look over here on the right hand side. So up here we've got the make target window. If you're using Eclipse managed make files like we are here, you won't need to use this. Make is a huge topic in itself and I'm not going to cover it in this course. So I'll close down the make window. Last of all, we have the outline window, which displays an outline of the code in the current source file, which is in the editor. It lists defines here with a blue hash symbol, public and private class methods with a green circle or red square, and other bits and pieces. Personally, I don't use this window very much either, as I prefer to navigate around the code with keyboard shortcuts, which I'll talk about in a later lesson. But you might find this useful when you're first getting familiar with new source files. I'm going to close it for now. Last of all, we'll take a quick look at perspectives. So In Eclipse, the windows are these individual areas with tab tops that we've been looking at. A perspective is the whole collection together. We're currently in the C++ perspective, which you can see selected at the top here. If you were developing in Java, you'd have the Java perspective selected. You can see a resource perspective here, which is actually the default perspective after you first installed Eclipse. Resource is concerned with files, which are resources essentially. So you can see this view has a project explorer, editor, outline, tab and tasks list. It's not for developing. We can close this because we're just not going to be editing files. We're going to be building, running and debugging. Okay, last of all, if you want to customize the menus and menu buttons in your perspective, you can do so under Window, Customize Perspective. So in here, you can see that we can change the toolbar visibility and which buttons are visible for each toolbar. We can change the menu visibility, which are the text menus right at the top of Eclipse. We can change what's known as command groups availability, which is a less fine-grained way of modifying the toolbars and menus. And finally, we can change the available keyboard shortcuts in the perspective. I'm leaving all of this as it is for now. Okay, so that's our little walkthrough of what we're looking at in Eclipse. Next up, we're going to start editing some code.